I got a message for you tonight, and hopefully I'm going to encourage you to stick with it. I'm going to encourage you to take it to the next level. And so, of course, I want to give a shout out to Kelly, who is tuned in. Kelly is representing from Bronx, New York. And so we got New York in the house. We got Alabama in the house. As you're tuned in, just do me a favor. Of course, just let me know what state you're representing and where you're tuning in from, because, of course, we want to give you a shout out before we get started on the Thursday night Show Up for Your Life motivational live stream. And so here's one of the things that I know. One of the things I know is if right now you are in the process, if you are in the pursuit of pursuing a big goal, a big dream, a big vision, one of the things that I know for certain is somewhere along the process of you trying to write the book, somewhere along the process of you trying to become debt-free, somewhere along the process of you trying to build a 6-figure, a 7-figure business, somewhere along the process of you actually trying to start your business, somewhere along the process of you making the career change, somewhere along the process of you trying to make your marriage work, somewhere along the process of you trying to do something significant in your life, listen, you are going to experience some trials. You are going to experience some difficulties, and there are going to be some moments where you're going to think about throwing in the towel. There are going to be some moments that you're going to say to yourself, why should I even bother? Why should I keep making this thing happen? And so what I want to remind you is specifically when it comes to life, life is a stick with it sport. For those of you who are note takers, listen, life is a stick with it sport. You got to stick with it. I was speaking to one of my friends earlier in the week, and we were just sort of chit-chatting, going back and forth. And I was asked, I said, hey, man, how the kids doing? How's your daughter doing? And his daughter is now a track star. And he said, but Andy, man, he said, listen, man, I need you to understand something. I remember when she first started off in track, man, she was pretty much average. And most of the time when it comes to races and the competitions, she wasn't even placing in first, second, or third. And most of the time she would walk away without even receiving any kind of reward, any kind of recognition. And he said, but one of the things that we just kept hearing from the coaches and from everybody around us, they said, listen, don't take her out of track. You just got to stick with it. And he said, man, listen, he said, it was hard to stick with it, man, when we were fighting through the injuries, on top of the fact that oftentimes she was performing at an average level. He said, Andy, it was hard to stick with it when we would have to go ahead and spend all this money traveling and going to junior Olympics and going to junior track meets and track races that cost a lot of money, catching the flight, the transportation, the cleats, and all the things in the process of traveling and going to these different track meets. He said, Andy, it was so hard to stick with it, especially every single time we were coming back home and we had nothing to show with it. He said we had nothing to show for it, man. He said it was so hard to stick with it. But he said every single time people just kept telling him, hey, don't take your daughter out of track. Just stick with it. They said track is a stick with it sport. And he said, man, he said, I'm so glad that I listened. Because he said, because we're willing to stick with it. He said, let me tell you something that I'd observed as a result of us sticking with it. He said, many of the people who were way ahead of my daughter, because my daughter continued to stick with it, at one point she wasn't even placing in the races. And now all of a sudden she was getting a little closer to actually placing. And then he said, because of the fact we were willing to stick with it, I remember the first time my daughter came in third place. And then he said, I remember it because we were willing to stick with it. I remember the time when she came in second place. He said, I remember because of the fact we were willing to stick with it. I remember when next thing you know, my daughter came in first place and she was in a position where she held the record. And he said, man, if I were to go back from the very beginning when we started off, he said, when we were working through the injuries, when we weren't getting the results that we wanted, when we wanted to make some great things happen and it just wasn't happening for us. He said, if I would have went back to those moments, he said, I would have never thought in a million years that my daughter would be the track star that she is right now. And he said, one of the things that I've learned is that track is a stick with it sport. And let me help you to understand something. It's not just track, but life is a stick with it sport. Business is a stick with it sport. Relationships is a stick with it sport. Your marriage is a stick with it sport. Let me tell you something. You got to be in it for the long haul. You got to get the mindset and you got to see beyond the circumstances. Listen carefully. You got to see beyond the challenges and the struggles that are happening right now. And so I know that there's some of you right now, you've got a dream, you got a goal. There's something you've been wanting to make happen. And as you look at your current circumstances, you're starting to get frustrated because you were hoping that you would see some different results. You were hoping that your bank account would look differently by now. You were hoping that you were going to get the right type of support. You were hoping that ultimately, this is what you were hoping. You were hoping that things would work out by now. You were hoping that now you'd be the published author. You were hoping that you would have the business off the ground. You were hoping that you'd have a multiple six-figure business. You were hoping that you would make the seven-figure mark. You were hoping that you'd be debt-free. You were hoping that your marriage would be easier. But here's what I want to remind you, that all those things that I just mentioned require that you stick with it. And so I understand that it will be difficult at times. I understand there will be times that you're going to want to throw in the towel. I understand that there will be times that you're going to get frustrated. I understand there are going to be times that there are people who you thought were going to have your back, people who you thought they were going to support you. I understand that there are going to be times that those people lead you astray. And there are going to be times that you second guess yourself. And you even wonder to yourself, can I make this happen? But here's what I want to remind you. Here's what I want to remind you is that you have to stick with it. And so for those of you who understand that life is a stick with it sport, for those of you who understand that your marriage is a stick with it sport, for those of you who understand when it comes to your goals and your dreams that you got to stick with it, do me a favor right now. And I want you to go ahead, put your hands on the keyboard, go ahead and type hashtag stick with it, hashtag stick with it. Because we're going to go ahead and spread out a message right now via social media. And we're going to make sure that people understand that they got to stick with it. Because here's what I know. There's probably somebody who's discouraged right now. There's somebody who's thinking about throwing in the towel. There's somebody who's this close. You listen to me? This close to having a breakthrough. This close to having the right connection. This close to getting their perfect opportunity. This close to finally getting the business off the ground. This close to getting to the income level that they want. This close to finding that perfect relationship. And here's what they're going to do right when it's about that time. Here's what they're going to do. They're going to throw in the towel. And so what we're hoping is that they're going to see that hashtag stick with it. And when they see that hashtag stick with it, they're going to say, wait a second. I got to stick with it just a little bit longer. I got to stay in the game just a little bit longer. I got to continue to make a couple more phone calls. I got to continue to work my business. I got to continue to stick forward and go through on my plan. I got to continue to find the right people to put on my team. I got to continue to pay off this credit card debt. I've got to continue to make my marriage work. Whatever it is that they're thinking about throwing in the towel, listen, they're going to see that hashtag stick with it. And they're going to say, wait a second, I was tuning in. I wasn't able to catch the whole message maybe, but I happened to tune in. There's a guy by the name of Andy Henriquez. He was talking on the Thursday night Show Up For Your Life motivational live stream. I was thinking about closing up shop and I was going to give up on that business idea. I was thinking about filing for divorce and throwing in the towel on my marriage. I was thinking about giving up on my goals and my dreams. And then I saw that hashtag stick with it. I heard stick with it. And so I decided to go back through it. And so I understand that there's somebody who's going through this, who's listening. They might be saying, but Andy, you don't understand. I know you're telling me to stick with it. I understand that you're telling me to stick with it, but you don't understand. I'm going through some hell right now. You don't understand, Andy. I'm going through hell. I was working with this company. I've been with them 10, 15 years. I put in the time. I put in the effort. And unfortunately, they let me go. And I've been out here trying to get another job opportunity and things aren't looking good. Andy, you don't understand. I'm going through some challenges right now. I went in to go see the doctor. I went in for a regular checkup. And as a result of me seeing the doctor, now all of a sudden they're telling me I got to come back for some extra visits. You don't understand my situation right now. You don't understand what it is that I am going through. And so for that person, listen, I know you're going through some stuff financially. I know you're going through some stuff physically. I know you're going through some stuff in your relationships. And I know that sometimes when you're going through those things, it absolutely feels like you're going through hell. But understand this, there's a wise gentleman, a gentleman by the Winston Churchill, and here's what he said. He said, if you're going through hell, keep going. Listen, if you're going through hell, you got to keep going. And listen, I understand it's difficult, but keep going. I understand that when you look to your right and your left, there's some people who started with you that are no longer there with you, but keep going. I understand that your bank account doesn't look like the way that you thought it was going to look, but what I'm saying to you is keep going. Listen, I understand that the person betrayed you. They lied to you. They told you something. You didn't think that they would let you down. But what I'm saying to you is that's okay. Keep going. I understand. I understand. You thought it was only going to take you 1 year, and now you're 7 years into the business, and you're still not where you want to be. What I'm saying to you is this: you got to keep going. And when you get tired, you keep going. And when you want to throw in the towel, you keep going. And when people try to talk you out of it, you keep going. And what you got to remind yourself over and over and over and over again, no matter how tough it gets, something that Robert Schuller said, and he said that tough times don't last, but let me tell you something, tough people do. And so I know it's tough at times when you're pursuing your goals and your dreams. I know that sometimes you got to wear the mask. You got to keep smiling and act like everything's okay. You're trying to maintain and hold it together, even when you're going through some difficult moments. I understand that that can be frustrating, but what I want you to understand is this, is that I understand it's tough, but you are tougher than your circumstances. You are tougher than whatever it is that you're going through right now, that you have something in you that gives you the ability to keep pushing forward and go beyond the circumstances. And oftentimes, whatever it is that you're facing right now is only preparing you for what it is that you're looking to go through. And so oftentimes you have to go through this difficult moment. You have to go through this difficult season so that you can get to the other side. And let me make you understand something, because some of you need to hear this, because some of you just may not know this, and I want to make sure you get this. But do me a favor, for those of you who are tuning in right now at this moment, do me a favor, because I know that there's somebody you're connected to that needs to hear what I'm about to say. Do me a favor, hit the share button, hit the share button, hit the share button, hit the share button. Go ahead and hit the share button, because I know that there's somebody that you're connected to that needs to hear this message. So do me a quick favor and hit the share button. Matter of fact, when you're done hitting the share button, put hashtag shared, hashtag shared, hashtag shared, and that'll let me know that you have shared this message, because I believe that there's somebody out there that really needs to hear this. And so like I told you, that understand this, if you're going through hell, keep going. Winston Churchill, powerful words. And Robert Schuller said that tough times don't last, but tough people do. But here's what I need you to understand, because some of you are saying, I don't know if things are necessarily going to work out for me through the end. And so I'm listening to you, Andy. You're telling me to stay in the game. You're telling me to keep pushing forward. You're telling me to stick it out in my marriage. You're telling me to stick it out in my business. You're telling me to stick it out with my goals and my dreams. You're telling me that all these things, to stick with it. You're telling me keep going. But Andy, how do I know it's going to work out? What if things don't work out? What if I don't get this business off the ground? What if I can't find another job? What if I can't find somebody to have a happy, fulfilling relationship with? I've been broken. I've been thinking about getting back out there. And what if I don't become debt free? What if I don't realize the things that I'm trying to make happen? What if it doesn't work out for me? And so here's what I want to remind you, because this is one of those things that if you just know this, if you could just know this, listen carefully. If you just know this, then there's a possibility it's going to help you to keep pushing forward. Now, I got a friend of mine that he used to frustrate the living daylights out of me, because no matter what it is that I was going through, no matter how difficult it was, when I would share things with him, he would say, Andy, man, don't worry about that. He said, man, don't worry, because it's going to work out at the end. Everything works out at the end. And let me tell you, when you're going through some difficult stuff, when you're in the midst of a very, very difficult challenge, you don't want to hear somebody tell you, oh, don't worry about it. Everything's going to work out at the end. And let me tell you, most of the time, it's just about every time he told me that, I would get so frustrated, because I understand he was coming from a good place. But at the time that I was sharing my difficulty and my challenge with him, a lot of times I was still in the midst of the struggle. I was still in the midst of the pain. And so when he would tell me that everything's going to work out, a lot of times I felt as if he was just dismissing me. And so here's something, though, that I realized. As years have gone by, and I look back at the things that I've had to deal with, as I look back at some of the challenges, like when I made the decision to leave corporate America back in 2004, and shortly thereafter, leaving corporate America, I took all of my savings and I made an investment in Costa Rica, and I lost all of my savings. And now I find myself in a situation, do I go back and ask for my job, or do I continue to push forward even though I have no money? And that was a difficult situation for me because I had just had enough courage to leave my job in corporate America. I had just had enough courage to go ahead and pursue my goals and my dreams. I had just built up enough courage to do the thing that I wanted to do. And then my safety net, my savings, I lost all of it. Let me tell you something. It was hard for me to push forward. And at that time, I didn't want to hear that, and don't worry, it's going to work out at the end. But let me tell you something, it worked out. You see, because I decided to not retreat and run back to my job. I decided to keep pushing forward. And for the longest, I started to feel as if I was a failure. And then in the midst of me feeling like a failure and saying, Andy, how could you be so dumb? How could you take all of your money and invest it overseas and invest it in Costa Rica? How could you just trust that person? I remember being in the midst of that, being so frustrated with myself and saying, Andy, how could you be so dumb? You're a failure. This is not happening. And then I remember seeing this little statement, and I believe it was John C. Maxwell that said it. Here's what he said. He said that failure is an event. It is not a title. It's not who you are. Failure is an event. It is not who you are. It is something that happened, but it doesn't define who you are. And when I look back at that situation, because of the fact that I was willing to stick with it, because of the fact that when it felt like I was going through hell, I kept going. Because of the fact that when things got tough, I decided to get tougher. What I realized is, as I look back, that because I was willing to push through that moment, that is the only reason why today I can say that I'm living out my purpose. It's the only reason why today I get to be able to use my voice and my gift to be able to encourage people. But let me tell you something. When I look back, even though I used to get frustrated at my friend, let me tell you, I stumbled across this quote. I remember one time from Tracy McMillan, and here's what she said. I want you to write this down. It's very important. She said, everything works out in the end. And she said, if it hasn't worked out yet, then it's not the end. If it hasn't worked out yet, then it's not the end. Listen carefully. Everything works out in the end. Your marriage, everything works out in the end. Your business, everything works out in the end. Your goals, your dreams, your vision, everything works out in the end. Even though you're in the midst of the struggle, even though you're going through some difficult moments, even though you're trying to get to the next level, everything works out in the end. And guess what? But you said, wait a second, Andy, it hasn't worked out yet for me. Well, here's what I say. Are you still breathing? Are you listening to me right now as I deliver this message? If you can hear me deliver this message, if you can breathe in right now, you can still pull in some air, guess what? It's not the end. It means that your time here is not yet over. And that means that there's still time for you to write the book. There's still time for you to start the business. There's still time for you to live out your making. There's still time for you to turn things around. There's still times that you can make some great things happen. Listen carefully to this. Everything works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out yet, then it's not the end. And so listen, I want you to put this down right now. Hashtag, it's not the end. Hashtag, it's not the end. Let me go ahead and type that in right now. Hashtag, because somebody needs to know that. Hashtag, it's not the end. Okay? This is what you got to know. Hashtag, it's not the end. So somebody's got to know it's not the end. Your time is not over right now. Listen, if you can hear me deliver this message, if you can hear my voice, it's not the end. And so, listen, George Eliot said this, it's never too late to become the person that you could have been. It's never too late to become the person that you should have been. And so, is it too late for you to write the book? No. Is it too late for you to start the business? No. Is it too late for you to make the career change? No. Is it too late for you to realize your gift, your calling, your making? No. Is it too late for you to go from just working a job in which you're just simply making a living to getting into a position so that you can live out your making? Is it too late? Absolutely not. And so that's the thing that I love about what Tracy McMillan said. She said, everything works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out yet, then it's not the end. Listen, somebody just reminded me, sometimes when it comes to your goals and your dreams, sometimes you may be delayed, but delayed does not be denied. And so what that means is that even though things didn't work out in your timeline, you thought that by now you'd be debt free. You thought that by now you'd have the book written. You thought that by now you'd have a successful business. You thought that by now you'd start your multi-level business. You'd get it to the level that you wanted. You thought that by now that you'd be traveling the world and you'd have a lot of options. You thought that by now that your congregation would have grew by a certain amount. There's a lot of things that you thought would have happened. But listen, just because your dreams have been delayed, just because things didn't work out in your timeline, it does not mean that you've been denied. It does not mean that it's not going to happen for you. And it does not mean, it certainly does not mean that it is too late. George Eliot was said it over and over again. It's never, ever, ever too late to become the person that you could have been. Why? Because that person is still in you. And oftentimes what you got to do is you got to put yourself in position to give birth to that person that you need to be. In other words, you got to learn to stay in position. I personally believe that most of the time we miss out on our blessings. We miss out on the things that we're called to do because we get out of position. I live down in South Florida. I'll never forget this. I live down in South Florida. And I remember we had a hurricane scare last year. And my wife was about 8 months pregnant. And my wife told me, here's what she said. She said, baby, and she started rolling that belly. Okay, you got a pregnant wife. For those of you who've ever had a pregnant wife at home, listen carefully. She was rubbing that belly. She said, baby, you know that there's a hurricane coming, right? Don't you think this would be a good time for you to get out there and go get us some hurricane supplies? Like I said, yes, honey, it's going to be okay. Now, I grew up all my life in South Florida, right? And so we're used to getting hurricane scares. And so I'm not going to lie. After a while, you get a little comfortable. And she said, baby, you know, there's a hurricane coming. Don't you think you should go ahead and get some extra water? You should get some batteries. You should get some bread. You should get some dry products. And I said, okay, baby, I'm going to do it. And so finally, I'm watching the news and I'm realizing that it really looks like the hurricane is coming and it's not going to deviate. And so I get in the car and I say, okay, this is going to be a quick run. I'm going to go buy some dry goods. I'm going to go ahead and get some water. I'm going to go grab some things. And so I get in the car. I make a trip over to our local supermarket that, for those of you familiar with South Florida, Publix, I get there. There's no more water. There's no bread. Everything's sold out. I said, but that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and head over to one of the drugstores. I go to CVS. The CVS I go to, there's no more water. There's no more bread. And there's no more batteries that I actually need. I said, wait a second here. Now I'm getting a little nervous because my wife's been telling me this all week long. And so finally I said, wait a second. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to drive away from my neighborhood because I'm telling you, surely if I go to another neighborhood, one of those CVS's, one of those Walgreens definitely has some water. So I make my way over to Plantation, Florida, one of the cities down in South Florida, and I go to immediately to a Walmart. I get to the Walmart and guess what? No more water, no more bread, and no more batteries. I'm like, wait a second here. I'm going to be in some big trouble. My wife is 8 months pregnant. Do you hear me? 8 months pregnant. I know I got to get some water. I head over to the Walgreens that is on the corner, not far away from where my mom resides. I get to the Walgreens, and all of a sudden I'm looking around, and once again, no more water, no more bread, no batteries. But I see the manager, and the manager says he could tell that I'm looking around. I'm looking for some water. He says, are you looking for some water? I say, yes, sir. I'm looking for some water. He said, listen, I got a 18-wheel truck that is coming with pallets of water. He said, all you got to do is get in line and get in position. And so I said, okay. And so I said, where's the line? I look, and I got about 22 people in line. I jump in line. I'm number 23 in line. And so we're just waiting. The manager said the water will be here in about 15 minutes. 15 minutes go by, and there's still no water. The truck has not delivered the water. We're sitting there, we're waiting. We're like, okay, but we're going to wait because there's no more water anyplace else. But guess what? 30 minutes go by. The truck still hasn't showed up. Now people are in the line. They starting to catch a little attitude, right? They starting to be like, well, where's this truck that you said that was coming, Mr. Manager? Where is this water that you said that we were going to have? And so people are getting a little frustrated, right? They're getting really, really angry right now, but it's okay because I'm saying to myself, wait a second, I got to get some water. I got a wife at home. She's 8 months pregnant. And now 45 minutes have gone by and the manager is still pacing back and forth. And now the line is now got about 50 people in line. And we're starting to wonder, is everybody going to be able to get a case of water? And now people are getting frustrated. And so finally, we're about 50 minutes. Remember, we thought we were going to be in line for 15 minutes. It has turned into 50 minutes. And somebody in the line goes absolutely bananas. This lady gets so upset. She starts rolling her neck. She curses out the manager. She literally gets so angry, and she was so negative, so toxic. She convinced at least about 15 other people in line to go ahead and get out of line too. And so here I am, I'm standing in line. I'm about number 23 in line. The people in the line get all upset, especially after this lady made a huge scene, and literally over 15 people get out of line. They get out of position. And so I go from being number 23, and now I'm bumped all the way up, and I'm about the 6th person in line and so forth. But here's what I need you to understand. You see, many of those people who are waiting in line, what they didn't understand is probably about 7 minutes after they left, that all of a sudden a big 18-wheel truck was going to show up with pallets and pallets and pallets and pallets of water. And the reason why they weren't able to get the water was why? Because they weren't willing to stay in position. You see, part of sticking with it is making sure that you stay in position. Most of us are just right around the block from receiving the blessing in our business, right around the block from receiving the blessing in our relationship, right around the block from making the thing happen. But what we do is we get frustrated and we allow somebody else to talk us out of getting out of our position. And so what you got to be willing to do sometimes is you got to be willing to stay in position. You got to stay in position, baby, right? Because listen, what I want you to understand, the person who wins in life, get this, listen carefully. The person who wins in life is not always the strongest person. The person who wins in life is not always the most talented. The person who wins in life is not always the one with the most amount of resources. But oftentimes the one who wins in life is the one who is willing to stay in position. You hear me? The one who is willing to stay in position. Most importantly, the one who's willing to stick with it. Once again, somebody do me a favor. Pull up right now on your computer, put your hands out, hashtag stick with it. Hashtag stick with it. And do me a favor, hit the share button. We're about to wrap up this message, but I know even if somebody catches the last 5 minutes of this message, they may make a decision to stick with it. They may make a decision to keep pushing forward. So do me a favor, put hashtag right now on your screen, put hashtag stick with it, because there's somebody this week, listen, somebody this week you're going to talk to, and you're going to say, boy, I was so glad I listened in. I caught Andy Henriquez on the Thursday night Show Up For Your Life motivational live stream, because I just heard a message that's for you. You go tell them, listen, hey, man, I know you thinking about throwing in the towel. Stick with it. I know you're thinking about leaving this marriage. Stick with it. I know you're thinking about giving up on the business. Stick with it. I know that you're thinking about leaving the career. You're getting frustrated. Stick with it. I know that you're thinking that you're never going to be able to make this thing happen, but stick with it. Life is a stick with it sport. Listen, my buddy, I was on the phone with my buddy Eric Rett, and we were on the phone. He said, man, my daughter, man, she's killing it now in track. And he said, track is a stick with it sport. And that resonated with me because I realized it's not just track. You see, life is a stick with it sport. Business is a stick with it sport. You see, the person who wins is not always the most talented. The person who wins doesn't always have the most amount of resources. The person who wins is not always the one with the most amount of connections. The person who wins is the person who is willing to hashtag stick with it. Stick with it. And so whatever it is that you're doing right now, I don't know what your goals and your dreams are. I don't know what it is that you're working on. Maybe you want to write the book. Maybe you want to start the business. Maybe you're thinking about creating a shift. Maybe you're thinking about doing a career change. Maybe you've been thinking about trying to get out of debt. Maybe you've been thinking about getting back out there, having a relationship. Whatever it is that you're looking to do, I can assure you of this, that if it's a big dream, if it's a big enough dream, there are going to be times that you're going to think about throwing in the towel. There are going to be times that you're going to be thinking and saying to yourself that should I continue to push forward? And I want to remind you one more time that you got to make sure that you're sticking with it. And sometimes it's going to feel as if you're going through hell. And like Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep going. And sometimes things are going to get really, really tough. And when they get tough, I want to remind you of what Robert Schuller said. He said that tough times don't last, but tough people do. And sometimes you're going to be asking yourself, is it going to work out? And when you ask yourself that question, I want to remind you that everything works out in the end. And listen carefully, if it hasn't worked out for you yet, if the business hasn't worked out for you yet, if the relationship hasn't worked out for you yet, if the finances haven't worked out for you yet, if the health hasn't worked out for you yet, listen carefully. Everything works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out yet, then understand this, it's not the end. If you can hear my voice, if you can take in some breath into those lungs, then it is not the end. And so the only thing that I want you to take away from tonight's message, the main thing that I want you to remember, is that whatever you do, no matter how difficult things get, no matter how challenging things get, I want you to remember that you are listening in to the Thursday night Show Up for Your Life motivational live stream. And Andy Henriquez said, whatever you do, make sure that you absolutely stick with it. So do me a favor right now before we go ahead and land this plane and end this message. I know for sure that there is somebody that you're connected to that needs to hear this message. So do me a quick favor. I know most of you have already shared the message, but if you're listening in right now and you still haven't shared this message, do me a favor, hit the share button, hit the share button, hit the share button, hit the share button, because I know that there's somebody who needs to just catch just a part of this message that's thinking about throwing in the towel. And because of the fact that you took the time to hit the share button, they're going to catch just a little part of this message, and catching that little part of this message is going to help them to be able to push through the trials. It's going to help them to take their lives to the next level. Now, here's the other thing. If for some weird reason you and I are not yet connected, I want you to just make sure that you connect with me. Here's how you do that. You're going to head over to andyhenriquez.com. When you get to andyhenriquez.com, look over on the left-hand side. You're going to see a place, or you might see a pop-up box where I offer you access to a teleseminar that I did that tells you how to be able to share and tell your story. But you're going to put in your name and your email address, and because there's been a lot of spammers out there, you're going to be requested to type in a security code to make sure that you're not a spammer, make sure you're a real person and you're not a computer, right? So you're going to put in your name and your email address, and that's going to allow me to stay connected with you. That's going to allow me to continue to encourage you. That's going to allow me to share resources with you that I believe is going to allow you to take yourself to the next level. If you're a person that you believe personally, you've been saying to yourself, well, Andy, you know what? I've been listening to you share these messages. Andy, I like the way that you share these messages. I love the way that you share those stories. And I tell you, Andy, I want to be able to share some of those stories the way that you share the story. And so I want to tell you about something special. I'm typing it in right now. My wife tells me that sometimes I can't multitask. So I think I'm doing a pretty decent job tonight. But for those of you who believe that you have a story, and hopefully I spelt that right as I was speaking to you, but for those of you who know you have a message, you have a powerful voice, and you want to be able to bring forth your message, you want to be able to bring forth your voice, then I invite you to do me a favor and join me in September for my next Master Storyteller Academy. And so the Master Storyteller Academy is a powerful 3-day experience. And I have some people who have gone through my Master Storyteller Academy who are listening into this message right now. You can ask any of them. They would tell you that the training is absolutely off the chain. And most importantly, it will transform your life. Most importantly, it's going to transform your ability to share your message so that you can share your message with power, feeling, and conviction so that you can influence people. And so most importantly, that you can make the level of impact that you want. If you know that you have a story, you know that you have a message, and you've been wanting to strengthen that message, then I invite you to join me in September for the Master Storyteller Academy. So all you got to do right now is head over to masterstorytelleracademy.com. Once again, that is masterstorytelleracademy.com. Head over there. You'll see a place where you can go ahead and apply. You can apply real quick so you can get the details about the upcoming Master Storyteller Academy. Somebody on my team, once you go ahead and apply and you set your appointment, somebody on my team will reach out to you and give you all the details about the upcoming September Master Storyteller Academy. I mean, this is an off-the-chain, off-the-charts 3-day experience. If you just literally want to find out about this opportunity right away, you can go ahead and hit me on IM Instant Message on Facebook as well. Or you can go ahead and shoot me over an email at andy@andyhenriquez.com. But the fastest way to get the details is to head over to Master Storyteller Academy. Go ahead and hit the apply button real quick, and that will allow somebody from my office to contact you and give you the details. Hey, listen, I don't know what your goals and your dreams are right now, to be honest with you. I don't know what it is that you're pursuing. I don't know what's the most important thing to you at the moment. I don't know if maybe you've been looking to strengthen your marriage. I don't know if you've been looking to advance financially. I don't know if you've been hoping to improve health-wise. I don't know if you've been thinking about starting a business, if you've been thinking about writing a book, if you've been thinking about making a career change. All I know is whatever it is that you're pursuing, if it's worthwhile, somewhere along the journey, you're going to have some challenges. Somewhere along the journey, you're going to have some setbacks. Somewhere along the journey, you're going to second guess yourself. And when those things happen, you just got to remember to stick with it. And so, of course, before we go ahead and sign off, I want to give a shout out. Yes, yes, yes. We got Betty Speaks. That is somebody who recently just graduated from the Master Storyteller Academy. Hashtag MSA. That's what it stands for, the Master Storyteller Academy. That's Betty Speaks. She's part of my Master Storyteller Academy. Graduated. She has received her Master Storyteller designation. But before we sign off, do me a favor. I want to give a shout out to a couple people before we sign off. As we go ahead and sign off, do me a favor, just type in real quick, type in your state, type in your city. I want to give you a shout out before we go ahead and finish up this live stream. And most importantly, too, don't forget to make sure that you are hitting the share button as we sign off. But go ahead and just type in your state, type in your city. I just want to give a shout out to a couple people before we go ahead and end this live stream broadcast. But I'm going to remind you over and over again, stick with it, stick with it, stick with it, stick with it. I know that you got something that you're going after right now. And whatever you do, do not throw in the towel. You are so much closer than what you think. Stick with it. So listen, I want to give a shout out. We got North Carolina in the house, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We got Charlotte, North Carolina in the house. We have a Shreveport. I hope I pronounced that right, is in the house. Let's get a couple more cities out there before we go ahead and sign off. Rep your city, rep your state. Want to give you a shout out before we leave. I know that this is a beautiful thing about these live stream broadcasts. You know, people are able to chime in for literally from everywhere. And so as we sign off with the Stick With It, with the Thursday night Show Up for Your Life motivational live stream, which you can join me each and every Thursday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. I want to thank every single one of you for being with me. You can join me the same time, same place next week. Set it on your calendar. Listen, it's like clockwork. You can count on it happening. You can join me next week, Thursday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. You will find us here for the Thursday night Show Up for Your Life motivational live stream. Shout out to James in Alabama. So I want to give a shout out to Alabama in the house. And so if somebody else wants to rep their city before we sign off, just go ahead and type in your city, your state. I'll make sure that I give you a shout out. But once again, I thank every single one of you for tuning in and being part of Thursday night Show Up for Your Life motivational live stream. This has been Andy Henriquez. And like I always tell you, listen, you got to make sure that you stick with it, but you also got to make sure that you continue to show up. Because if you don't show up for your life, if you don't show up for your dreams, if you don't show up to make the things that you want to make happen in your life, then believe me on this, nobody else will. And so thank you so much. I appreciate you joining me for the Thursday night Show Up for Your Life motivational live stream. Join me same time, same place next week, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. Thank you so much. God bless. All right, Lewis, my man. How you doing, my man? So yes, Lewis, so we'll be able to open up the lines. I'm gonna give a quick shout out to the people who are watching on YouTube. So hey, YouTube family, how you doing? We're about to sign off. I'm gonna take the Q&A right now. For the people who are listening in right now via the conference call line, I thank all of you for tuning in and joining me on the Thursday night Show Up for Your Life motivational live stream. Thank you. Have a good evening. God bless.